Hey kids, what's for dinner?
Good evening and welcome back to EndGame, your companion to Apple TV's hit series Severance. I'm your host, Jambone S, and with me is your co-host, Misha R.
Arr.
Both of us are huge fans of the show, and we're here to help you manage your work-life balance, keep your innie in and your outie out, and remember to always win the waffle party. Misha, are you going to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am.
Nice. Very good.
Thank you. Hello, folks. How you doing? Welcome. We are right smack dab in the middle of our look back on season 1, our deep dive, full spoilers because we're talking about everything with all the knowledge we can gain from all the episodes. Right in the middle of that. So we're taking a brief break and we're going to do the little bit of ancillary or corollary or auxiliary material that they put out, which is the Lexington Letter and the MDR handbook. So we're going to talk about those things in the next pod or two, or we'll cut this one up into two, which is probably what we're going to do for stations down the line. And then we'll get right back to 106, which I think is the next one. We got 6, 7, 8, 9. Got a special guest for 9, so we're really excited about that. Excited to be here on YouTube. This is our first foray into it. And, we've had to do an episode over already, so there's always that. But we're having a really good time, and hopefully you guys are enjoying watching it. If you are, please click the like, click the subscribe, ring the little bell, do the share thing too. And, of course, let this run. Even if you walk away from the computer, even if you mute it and minimize the window, just let it run. That helps us with the algorithm. And I don't think I'm even joking about that. All right. Plus, we've got plenty of stuff coming down the road, like The Boys are coming back. The Gen V spinoff of The Boys. We've got some live streams we're planning to do. Hollywood Whine, EndGame America, all that fun EndGame Nation stuff. So do join us for all of that, and especially this Severance thing. And when Severance comes back later this year, we're really, really excited about that, obviously, because it's a freaking amazing show. All right, let's get into, I have them out of order. The Severance, the Lexington Letter.
Yeah, today we're doing the Lexington Letter, yes.
Yes, today we're doing the Lexington Letter. Let's, why don't you go ahead and start? I've got a whole bunch of shit to say, so.
Okay, good. So listeners, friends, countrymen, Romans, if you have been watching Severance, you have probably heard of the Lexington Letter. If you have not, it is that time to hit pause and go read it. Or actually don't, because I'm almost going to summarize the entire fucking thing. So you can just stay. Don't hit pause, stay.
I mean,
I'll just tell you the whole thing.
Do go and read it. And I'll tell you this right now, one of my beefs with it, I guess, is there's a lot of fluff to it. Like when I look through it, looking really just for content and meaty shit for the show, there is a lot. Don't get me wrong, but it's couched in a lot of verbiage.
I have a critical take and a forgiving take that I haven't decided which that are both still fighting in my brain regarding the Lexington Letter.
What's the rationale for each? What's the rationale for the critical and
I have. So just what? Let me just say what the Lexington Letter is.
Oh yeah,
first.
go ahead.
Yeah. So, the Lexington Letter is, what did you say? You called it an auxiliary piece?
Yeah, something. It's a secondary piece. It doesn't. Now you said that if you watch Severance, you've heard of it. It's not mentioned in the show. It's this thing that's out there.
Okay.
Now, another point that I want to make that really surprises me, is that a show like Severance doesn't have more of an in the real world, like if you go to Lumon.industries, it's a pretty weak website. They could be doing so much like in the real world. They've done this, like we've seen, Westworld did a shitty job of it. Some shows do a really phenomenal job.
What was the show that really did a good job? That really had the good.
Yeah, I know. There is one out there that just freaking was great. And then I remember we were watching Westworld and we're like, oh, that's lame the way they did that to get you to the website or something like that. Anyway, surprised that Severance didn't do more of that even in the first season as a way to grab you, because everything about it lends itself to having a website.
Oh, Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot had all the stuff, that was online and was was good
watch
and
that?
was canon. Yeah, I think we did.
I think we did. Yeah, so something like that, because this show would be perfect for it. We'll see what season 2 brings. That said, this is one. They have a LinkedIn page, which just points you to back to the video page on Apple. There is something on the Lumon.industries. I just took it. Actually, you can take a wellness session. You do not get a hug, however. And, little
Bucket
stuff
I'm
like
out.
that, but there's no, mystery or anything to help you figure things out that are in the show or any crossover stuff like that yet, except for this. So that's why we're going to go for it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, so the Lexington Letter, canon or canon light?
Canon.
Okay.
Well, wait. Okay. Just to be clear, I think I'm still going to stick with canon. How do you define canon light?
Canon light is, a category that is reserved for, reserved for stuff like the Lexington Letter, which is that, it's probably canon, but I feel like the writers later on in the season, if, they listed all the locations of Lumon and Topeka, Kansas never came up, I wouldn't be totally surprised. I don't know how serious, is the same writing team doing this, or did they did an intern that was working on Severance be like, hey, okay, yeah, fine. You want to write a Lexington Letter, put it on the internet, go ahead.
Well, with all due respect, it does have more than just a whiff of fanfic, right? I mean, it really kind of does.
Yeah,
the way it's written,
yeah.
Right. That's
Okay, that was my criticism. My defense, though, is that it's just a person writing a letter. So the fact that the writing kind of sounds like amateur writing fits the type of document that it would be. It's a person in distress writing a letter to.
I know exactly what you're saying,
person.
and you're right. But I would counter on this just on this one point, because I went back and forth on this in my own head. I would counter that if someone was really a writer and not a fanfic writer, they would write exactly what you described differently and more economically than they have here. You could still get that point across. You could still be Peggy. She could still be scatterbrained. She could still be this, but it would be a little bit less. It would be toned down just a little bit, but equally effective. That's what separates the good writers from the fanfic writers, is the fanfic writers. And this comes across as fanfic. That said, to the original question, I do, in fact, think this is canon.
Okay. Well, that is what matters most to me, because I at least want to be able to take it seriously.
Yeah, because it got released on Apple, right? They're the ones that released it. So it's in support of their TV show. And everything about it looks designed to make you treat it like canon. Right? So I have no reason to think it's not.
All right. Any more opening material, or should we just get into it?
Let's just go.
Okay. So Peggy is a bus driver. Basically it begins with her talking about a bus driving accident. I think we're seeing a theme here.
First she teases the Dorner truck incident. Okay, because she says...
Tell us about that.
Well, in the beginning, it's right here. I just went through what I did is I just highlighted the damn thing on all the points and made notes in the margin. Marginalia. I chose to reach out to you because I've seen, among other things, this is Peggy speaking to the reporter to whom she has sent this letter.
So she chose a reporter because the reporter had previously
covered this particular event.
Okay.
The Dorner truck incident on November 3rd. Okay.
So the Dorner truck incident is the same as the school bus incident, not a different.
No. I mean, okay. So before she gets to talking about how she's a school bus driver and then she, had an accident and quit and went to Lumon, she's writing this letter to a reporter. That's the whole point that Peggy wrote the letter for, is to get this information out to the press, right? It's that kind of letter. And so the first couple of paragraphs of the Lexington Letter are actually Peggy, speaking to Daria, the reporter to whom she sent the letter, and she says explicitly, I chose to reach out to you because I've seen, among other things, your thorough coverage of the Dorner truck incident on November 3rd. Okay, so that's why she sent it to this reporter. Then she goes on to begin to recount how she's a bus driver. That's all.
Okay, so no, I think this is important because like Severance or Lumon has a thing with targeting victims of car accidents. Peggy gets in a bus accident and becomes an employee. Gemma, Miss Casey, dies in a car accident and becomes a captive. Later on, Peggy dies in a car accident. What is this fourth car accident? I thought I read the letter closely. I'm missing the part that you're talking about. Is this a fourth car accident?
This is some incident that I don't even think happened locally, and I don't think it was an accident, which I think is the point. That was covered by the news by this reporter Daria DT. DT.
Mm-hmm.
Although, you're right. No, although. That was the end of the sentence. So, in the second paragraph, Daria Thorne. I'm sorry, it's right there in front of my face.
I chose to reach out to you because I've seen, among other things, your coverage of the Dorner truck incident on November 3rd. I thought about. Okay, so we don't really know if the Dorner truck incident connects to Severance or Lumon in any way. We don't know.
We don't know yet. Read the letter.
Yes, okay.
We'll get there.
Yeah, okay. But it is... So there's definitely a pattern here. We have
there seems
Gemma,
to be a
Miss
modus
Carlisle.
operandi. There seems to be their favorite way of operating is, like in Russia, people just seem to fall out of windows and off balconies a whole hell of a lot. More than statistical probability would probably call for.
Oh my God, dude, I cannot wait till we do the handbook pod. I have some super hot Russia takes that you were going to love.
Oh,
you might be way ahead of me on them.
Okay, we'll see. Yeah, anyway.
Okay.
You totally did that out of my mind.
So here's my first question, right? Peggy's a bus driver at 50, and I am the last person in the world that would ever say anything bad about the good people that drive the buses for our kids these days. Like they are heroes. They have a tough, hard job, and I've heard horrible stories about things they had to put up with, and I've also heard wonderful stories about this kids that, have their lives almost saved by bus drivers, or literally saved, or like protected from bullies, or a kid that has no one in their life that looks out for them except for this one bus driver and stuff. So I am not disparaging bus drivers. I would never do that. Listeners, you all know me. But to be a 50-year-old bus driver and get hired by Lumon, there's a class jump here in my mind, right? Can you say this in a better way than me so I don't feel like an asshole?
I don't know what it is you're trying to say.
Okay, I think Lumon hires... I thought Lumon hired people with like college grads, master's degrees.
Wait, what?
I get that vibe.
Okay.
From the show, but this person was not that type.
No, this person was not that type, but wait. Well, sorry. I put that in front of
No, go ahead. I want you to take over. I want to stop.
No, I'm looking at the monitor and I accidentally waved the paper in front of the camera like that and cut off the view.
But I can't see you.
You can't see that, but I got to learn not to do that shit. Did I mention we're new on YouTube? Hang on. I'm looking for my, okay. So yeah, I'm sure upstairs, in accounting, they want you to have the CPA, in whatever, in the IT department, they want you to know what you're doing there. But in the severed floor, and not so, I don't think it's so much about being severed as about doing the numbers, okay? They're looking for someone, and it says it in the manual when we get to that. It's like, your emotional intelligence is more important. So there's no reason, I wouldn't think, that a 50-year-old bus driver who, passes the specific test, and they may make no sense to the bus driver, but whatever Lumen is testing for, they may have that regardless. So, you can find some freaking homeless person or someone in a shelter who possesses that kind of emotional intelligence. He may not have a job or anything like that, but he has what it takes to sort the numbers. And I think that's more what it's a reflection of.
Okay. I think there's also an implication in the Lexington letter that Peg was targeted. Like, the bus accident happens, and then right at this time, she hears the ad come over the radio. Almost like everyone was hearing the ad at that time. Like, it was almost like done on a shortwave radio right to her bus in this moment of crisis. Did you get that implication at all?
I got that they were trying hard to imply it, but it, for me, I'm on.
Peg felt that way at some point, but whether it's true or not, I think Peg maybe felt that way.
Well, I mean, yeah, Peg felt that way, and she put as much in the letter, and by doing so, the author of the Lexington Letter as a book, going meta for a second, pushes that idea towards you for sure. It would be a whole lot of car accidents. I just think they'd be more creative than that, but maybe, go with what works. Honestly, I consciously rejected it because I thought it just screamed too much of a red herring to me. But maybe so. But how would they know to target her? What have they been doing, to target her? Now, Mark, I understand because of Gemma. Helly, I understand because she's fam and, she's got to do the thing. And I'm sure Dylan and Irving and even Bert, all because Bert's severed, all have their own situations. But, I don't think it's that. I don't think that they're like targeting everyone. But I do think there's a particular set of qualifications, although maybe, it works that way for sure. I'm temporalizing here and stammering because I'm trying to process it out in my brain and think whether I want
yeah, fair enough. Let's keep all options on the table. So the other thing that I found interesting about the letter is that they chose to make it a macro data refinement person. Topeka, Kansas, a different location. I mean, as far as we know, this is definitely not Kansas where our severance takes place.
Oh,
right?
no. Not definitely.
So,
wherever it is.
So this is a different location. I didn't do the work, but I feel like we could do an analysis and think about the type of businesses that have places in Topeka, Kansas, and then, extrapolate out from there and figure out how many locations they were. I mean, I'm thinking, a little less than Amazon, no, a little less than Walmart, maybe
Lumen.
Maybe yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. You never know. Do they have a retail division? Are there Lumen stores?
They sell deodorant.
Is it? Well, they sell deodorant, or they make deodorant that gets sold at CVS, or is it sold at Lumen store? And is it are they like E Corp? Is there a Lumen 7-Eleven where you go and you buy all Lumen products?
Yeah. My guess is 20 to 30 Lumen headquarters around the country. It's really unscientific, but it's big enough. It's big enough that they talk about it in Congress, so it can't be 5 because I don't think it would. I don't think people are protesting in the streets.
Well, no, they talk about severance. If you could be one corporation, but if you are the one that comes up with severance and you start doing this, Congress is going to start talking about you. I don't think they're.
Well, we know it's not. We know it's at least 2, though. We know it's at least 2.
Sure. But I'm just saying that what Congress is talking about is the severance procedure, not just the general size of Lumen.
Yeah. I did think the deodorant comment was really interesting. Peg, who is about 50, says that she's been wearing Lumen deodorant since she hit puberty, which Do we know the year of the Lexington Letter? Probably. I'm just going to say 2020. So I'm going to say she hit puberty minus 40 years ago, 1980. So Lumon has like been mass produced, like producing a product that everyone would know about, their deodorant, among other things, since 1980.
Oh, much longer than that. They've been doing it because it says either in this or in the handbook that they started as a salve company in like 20 or 18, whatever, 1890.
What's that word you just used? I don't understand.
Salve,
that word.
Salve. You rub it in.
What does that mean?
It's like an ointment.
Oh, anything you like rub?
Yeah.
Like
They started
ointment?
as a patent medicine company, way back in the day, like Kellogg.
And that's why that's why they met mixing ether. It was like initially a chemical company before it got into all the weird brain chip shit.
Well, I got the impression that the courtship of Imogen and Keir, where they were whiffing the ether, happened before Lumon was founded, and it was like I said in the last part, the ether-inspired visions that led Keir to found Lumon and his salve and his patent medicine, and then they just took it from there, and it became a big industry. Something probably helped in the war.
Okay. So I know this is our Lexington Letter episode, and it might not be the time to throw down a massive theory, but it occurred to me while researching and reading and thinking about the Lexington Letter. I think the board is Keir's chip put into a computer. Or one of the early, I think not necessarily Keir, because he's so old that maybe the chip didn't exist. But I think a dead Egan, their chip has been put into a computer and augmented with AI. I think that's what the board is. And that's why, like, some of it makes sense and some of it's nonsense. In the same way that the innies are children, I think the AI that's running the company is also a child because, AI, like, hello world, when AI is born, it doesn't really understand what they're doing. And that's why a lot of the shit that the company does and the board does is very random and weird, is because they're childlike themselves. What do you think of that theory?
Well, I was leaning towards the theory that the board is actually just still Keir and all the other chairmen throughout time of Lumon Industries that have been chipped and are kind of kept alive, and in the same way that Miss Casey is only been around for 108 hours, and I guess is brought to when she is needed to go monitor Helly or give a hug or something like that. Maybe the board is just brought to when the board needs to make a decision. And so that, there's one scene where there's sort of like a raspy, heavy breathing, creaky voice that speaks over the intercom from the board. Maybe that's ancient Keir being chipped and kept alive just to say stuff like that. So, I'm not too far off from where you're at.
Yeah, we're kind of similar theories, just slightly different kind of takes on it. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm just like, the point I want to like ask you about though, because it seems like we like kind of agree. Do you agree that like the more we learn about Lumon, especially in the seventh floor, a lot of the shit they do is kind of silly. Like the video you get at the end of completing a file is just like kind of silly. Like the instructions they get, the things they are doing, the numbers, like
the prizes they get an eraser and a finger trap and a melon party, right? It's all part of the infantilization of the innies, So it seems silly to us, to you and me out here, but to, the innies, it seems mysterious and important. I really think that's a big piece of what we're seeing is just that's how they treat the innies. there's some line, and I think we didn't even talk about it in whatever episode it was, where something happened, and I guess it was with Helly, might have been with Mark or somebody, and Cobell or someone said, "Did you try directed praise?" Right? Like that's another technique, like a 626, like running a 626. It's just another like thing they do to the innies to keep them calm and keep them in control. Did you try directed praise? Did you give them a hug? You know, just sort of like there's a checklist, very much like the checklist Mark goes through when he's dealing with Helly on the table. There's like a whole script.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it's all scripted out. It's almost like all the people down there are like running on a program. Like they do this. If this doesn't work, try this. If not, then this. If this, then that. You know.
Well, because that goes that that would support the idea that one of the things that Lumon is trying to do with the innies is to understand so that they can develop a set of protocols so that they can replicate this in places, and you don't have problems like the girl who got knocked up, whose innie got knocked up at work. Right, that we talked about in previous episodes, that Mark hears about when he's watching the news one night, and that's the issue on the news, is that a woman's outie is pregnant because of what her innie was doing at work.
You are free to say more. This will be my final word on the topic. But just if AI was trying to learn everything they needed to learn about people to subjugate them as a species, this could be that. So well, that's all I'm going to say. But you have the final word. Go ahead.
Well, I would just say that I don't think that the innies are reflective of, mankind. They're a very rarefied, very scientifically plucked out subset of mankind. And if AI were to use just innies to learn whatever it is they were to learn and try to extrapolate that that's going to be how they're going to have to interact with outies and regular people out there, I think there's a big gap. I don't think that's what it is, just because they're too different. Okay.
Okay, I'm taking it back. That was not my final word. Okay. I have to respond. No, I hate to say this about my fellow man, but I think we are all innies in a lot of ways, or most of us are innies in a lot of ways, and like I do think if you can manage the innies, I think you could rule the world. Like we all go to work. We all fucking do what we're told. We all fucking like worry about this and that. Like, or do you think we're really any like? I don't mean we as in me and you, but do you think people in general are actually any like cooler, or more independent, or free of thought than innies?
That's a very debatable point. It's the stuff of all the oldest and most deep philosophical wisdom traditions, the very idea that everyone's asleep, you go back to Plato's cave even, that whole thing. But what I meant was that the innies don't have the depth of experience that even their sleepwalking outies have, and it's just not a fair comparison, because the innies are a pared down version. And no matter how you slice it, I don't think you're going to be able to come up with a battle plan against the outies, if you will, by studying just the innies, because they're just too different. And the innies have too much that the outies don't have. The outies have too much that the innies don't have, that you're not going to get and learn about by studying just the innies. You'll be surprised. You'll be like, oh, I didn't know the outies could do that, if you think that they're exactly like the innies. That's all. Let that be the final word.
Yes, let that be the final word. Okay, so covered that. The next thing I want to talk about is I have a quote here that there's two direct quotes that I took from the Lexington Letter. And this is once they start passing the notes back and forth. First of all, I got to say, what a Jerry, right?
Wait, what?
Remember Jerry from Rick and Morty, when he starts writing notes back and forth to himself from the from his sleep self.
Okay, wait, before we even get to that, there's some stuff I want to get to.
Cool. Go ahead.
She, and when I say she, it's probably going to mean Peggy writing the letter.
So I think Peg and Peggy. Peg is the outie. Peggy is the innie. I think that's the way it's
sorry.
written.
Sorry, Peg. I guess you're dead, so it doesn't matter. She says, my innie is what they call it. Okay. And I thought that Natalie got really upset at that dude she was debating on the TV news show that Mark was watching in perpetuity. I thought that she gets pissed off when he uses that phrase, but maybe I'm getting it mixed up. Anyway, I had that thing. It's interesting, 4 times the pay, okay? 4 times what she was making as the bus driver. So they definitely really wanted her. And then, okay, so she had the procedure, right? She was severed, all that, and it was totally fine. I was severed and all that. It was totally fine. Now, this is still the Audi, her speaking. They even gave me a really nice 4-cheese panini afterwards because my procedure time slot butted up against the lunch hour. Okay? That seems like an innie thing, right? You get the 4-cheese panini bar or party. You can pass on the wall.
It does seem like a reward.
It just struck me as an anything they were giving to an Audi. It was interesting that they call what you're supposed to wear to work Lumon neutrals, right? No labels, tags, patterns, that whole thing.
So in the show, they wear like, business professional. I got the sense that more this was like jumpsuits, like in the Lexington Letter.
Jumpsuits like James Bond villains uniform stuff. No,
like mechanic, like type, like one piece.
Oh,
like,
yeah. No,
wearing a jumpsuit.
I mean, it just says Lumon neutrals as they call them, apostrophe EM, sick. Which means no labels, tags, which makes sense with the detector, code detectors. Patterns, no words at all on anything. Company policy. That's what it says right there. They talk about the code detectors when you sign up.
Well, yeah. So does the Lexington Letter, we've had thoughts on whether the code detectors are real or not. Did the Lexington Letter push you one way or the other on that opinion?
I think it pushed me more towards that they're not because they're handled pretty stupidly later on. There's a definite particular thing that I pulled out that made me go, what? So we'll talk about that when we get there. Peg continues to describe her day and like going down the elevator, and she, this is a separate line, its own paragraph in the Lexington Letter. It says she was capital me, but capital not me, and I mean that sums up the whole thing kind of right there. Peg is feeling it because she's interacting with her any more than probably anybody else usually does. But she sums it up nicely right there. Anyway, go ahead. I think I'm caught up to where you were.
So the quote that I wrote down here, one of 2, begins, she wanted to know everything about outside life, like what it felt to be drunk or asleep. I'd never thought of it before, but she'd never been asleep because I do that on the outside. Or fall in love. That one was a toughie to answer. Just ask my ex-husband. Or to have someone you love die. So these are the experiences that innies are missing out on. These are like, I think it's just an interesting choice. Like being drunk, being asleep, being in love, having someone die. Are those kind of the 4 of the most important human experiences?
Being drunk.
I know you wouldn't count being drunk.
Well, I mean, we can extend that to any other form of,
Sure. Let's just call it being inebriated. Yeah,
enhanced. Yeah, I mean, those are certainly core things that they don't have access to the memories of, and yet, I don't know if this is fanfic bad writing or red herring stuff. Peggy asks about all that. And at the same time, she knows Puglish.
Okay, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna
Right.
get. I want to get to the Puglish thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But hey, I want to ask you this, and I want you to really think about it, and I want you to please answer honestly and earnestly. Are there human experiences that you haven't had that you wonder about? As any Peggy wonders, like, what does it feel like to be asleep, or to be drunk, or to be in love, or to have someone die?
You mean like anything like fundamental, basic, like sleep or something like that, or anything within the realm of
something you haven't experienced that other humans have. Have you ever like wondered what it's like to experience that?
I want to go to space. I want a wingsuit, right? I want to do shit like that. You know, all the adrenaline stuff that you got to train for a really long time to do. So I could put all that out there. That's stuff. You know, what it's like to kill another man. You know, whatever.
Yeah, thank you for. I wanted honest and earnest. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. I don't wonder about that one.
I don't.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Third, fourth. But yeah, I mean, definitely shit. There's a lot of shit that I see on YouTube that I want to do. I'll cop to that. Like the wingsuit, dude. I had wingsuit on my feed for months and months and months, and I don't mean the song. So, what about you?
So this line, I don't think I wonder enough about the experiences I haven't had. That's what this line was so powerful to me. Like a line from the Lexington Letter. You think it's not going to hit you, but I just started thinking about all the things that I don't wonder about, because I really don't. I think about the experiences I've had that I want to have again, or when I want to have new experiences, they're just kind of derivatives of ones I've had before. Like I really like playing guitar, but now I play piano. So then this line made me think outside the box, and it took me to some weird places that we don't need to get into. But okay, fine, I'll just say one. I read that line and I realized I had never thought there are some specifically female experiences that I had never wondered what that was like.
Oh,
and this line, for the first time in my life, I was like, I wonder what it is like to be on the other end of, and I never thought about it. And so that's the Lexington Letter, as silly as it is, was powerful in that sense, because it had me thinking some deep thoughts on a Thursday afternoon.
So this is my experience of wondering. I remember all the way back, as far back as being a little kid, okay? When people asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up, and I used to get really upset because like, even back then you'd say, oh, I want to be an astronaut, right? But I would always think like, if I have to be one thing, then that means I'm never going to know what it's like to be, a fireman or a garbage man or a this or that, anything like that, if I'm going to be this other one thing. Little fucking kid having that thought. I remember that distinctly.
No.
So I've clearly been always worried about, the opportunity cost of anything, like the things you're missing out on or the other things you could be doing.
Okay, so Misha, let's fucking make the wingsuit thing happen.
Oh, dude.
I'm in if you're in, dude.
You know what it takes? It takes 100 parachute jumps before they'll even give you one.
Oh, fuck.
Really? I looked into it. Believe me. And for whatever reason, in my mind, and I freaking hate heights. Oh, my God. Like, is stomach turn? I don't know if I could actually ever do it. But jumping off like doing a base jump off like a tall cliff or something in a wingsuit, for some reason seems, more easy on my fear of heights than throwing myself out of an airplane with a parachute. But anyway.
I say I don't. I feel the opposite way. I think jumping out of a plane with a parachute is way safer.
Oh, then
you want to know the reason that I won't a parachute is because like the first 2 or 3 times you do it, you have to like sit in another man's lap, and I'm too like I'm I think I'm pretty confident and safe in my sexuality and all that, but I'm not sitting in another man's lap while we go up in a plane and then jump out while he does the parachute.
All right.
Like you have to go up in the plane. What do you talk about while you're sitting in that guy's lap? You gonna do that?
I'll let you know. Dude, I'm throwing myself out of it differently. It's fucking weird because I'll go up on any ski lift or anything like that. That's all fine. But like, and I'll fly in planes and shit, but throwing myself out of one, that's a whole other thing. And also tall buildings. Because I used to, I lived and worked in tall buildings in San Francisco, and with that earthquake thing always looming over your head, it's just sort of a... Anyway, me and my therapist are working on it. So where are we on the Lexington Letter?
Okay, so we wanted to talk about Puglish and the things that get through and don't get through. So I'm going to read a quote and then we're going to talk about Puglish. Peg says in the letter, it was strange to see how the procedure filtered her knowledge, referring to Peggy. She knew what beer was, but couldn't name a specific brand. She knew she lived in America, but couldn't draw a map to save her life. She knew that movies existed, but did not know who David Niven was, despite him being my longest standing crush. It was like she'd seen only a vague shape of the world through a foggy window. So we're going to get to Puglish. First of all, I just got to ask you, you're a David Niven guy, aren't you?
Well, I know who he is, and I'm familiar with a lot of his work.
Oh, I figured he'd be like a fit. He's in the Casino Royale. He's in the comedy Bond.
Oh, he's in a ton of shit.
I'm not. I don't love Pink Panther, but as Around the World in 80 Days, that was like a big movie in my house as a kid for some reason. I don't know why.
Funny movie.
Yeah. Okay, so in addition to this, in the same conversation, I want to talk about this quote, but I also want to talk about the fact that this Peg and her sister, when they were kids, came up with this, language that they used to talk, and that somehow did stay even in the innie. Do you think that's consistent with what we've seen in the show?
No. Not really.
Interesting.
But I don't know how much we've actually seen in the show to draw that much of a... Why? Do you think it's consistent? You clearly do.
No, I just expected you to say it.
Oh, you thought... oh, okay. No.
I just thought you were going to say it.
No, I do not think it's particularly consistent with what we've seen in the show because if like the love of the century, like the Princess Bride level kind of love doesn't cut through the Severance. Now, this could have been an earlier version of the chip maybe or whatever, but overall from what we have been presented in the present day Mark timeline and stuff, it doesn't seem consistent with that.
Okay. So I had the same thought. At first I was like, that doesn't make sense that the language would get through. As soon as I was reading it, red flags went up for me. The excuse that I made for it is that if Peg and her sister made this language really, really early on, then that could account for some of it. That the chip, when it severs you, because you still got to know language. I think maybe things that you learned very early on are still saved in the inning.
So, like, if you grew up in a bilingual household, you'd retain both languages because you learn them at a point before the innie's severing reaches, right?
I think that's a perfectly good explanation.
So, there's something that Petey says. Hang on. Petey says something when he's describing the experience of the sickness that he's got. And he says the timelines are all fucked up. So it's like, he says, so it's like you're in the office, but it's also like you're in fifth grade or you're 5 years old or something like that. So that might be some sort of marker to how far back, or maybe for Petey, how far back it goes. But it goes at least that far back kind of thing. I'm just thinking in those terms. But that would be the only thing. What does she say? What does Peg say about when she and her sister developed it? How old were they?
Oh.
Kids.
I can't tell you. It's like very young though. I can't. I don't have it off the top of my
It doesn't
head.
say. I'm reading that very thing, the very paragraph wherein she describes their creation of Puglish, and she says we were kids. So she doesn't say how old she was, but that would be something that would be consistent with why Mark and Gemma don't recognize each other, because they're not childhood sweethearts, as far as we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if they were, that would be very interesting.
Yeah. So, would any Peggy remember her sister, the person? She remembers. Well, she also says the language came to her kind of slowly. It wasn't like she immediately knew the language, right? It like kind of slowly came to her.
Well, and then she
and I think-
just started writing in it, and it came to her, and she didn't know from where. So I don't think it came with a memory of her sister. It just kind of came as the language.
Yeah. So, I don't remember where I read this, but I was like doing some research about the show, and they were talking about the difference between procedural memory, which is like when people say riding a bike, that's the example of procedural memory, which would be the same as like language. So something like Puglish or just learning how to speak is you remember that in a very different way. I don't remember the term for the other type.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm going to say experiential. That's not what it was though.
No.
But that like,
but the remembering the fact that you have a sister, right? As opposed
Yeah,
to how
it's
to
different.
do X, Y, Z. Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking would be, the plausible explanation for that. So, yeah.
So I think I have two more big questions, and then anything else you want to talk about, I'm happy to. This is a fun discussion. But I think that really the big question of the Lexington letters is, did the macro data refinement cause the truck? Oh, that's the truck accident.
Yep.
Okay. That's the, what is it referred to as in the Dorner,
Dorner, yeah.
the Dorner truck incident.
That
Okay.
is that.
Okay. So the Peggy's, the innies, macro data refinement finishes a job at 2:30 on a certain day. And at 2:32, a truck crashes. And Audi Peg makes this connection.
That she does.
Do you think this is a real connection, or do you think the character Peggy is just connecting random dots?
You know what they say, correlation is not causation. So, and that's why the whole thing seems, just a little red herring-ish to me, because there's really, and I kind of went back over it, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you went over it as well, but there didn't seem to me to be much of anything else substantive or substantive.
Substantive.
Yes.
That word is so fucking hard to say.
Or
Substantive.
factual. How's that? There's nothing factual. There's no other data point that she puts out in this letter beyond that temporal correlation and whatever. So I don't really know, unless it's the feels crossing back over and something that Peggy Innie felt while sorting the numbers comes back to her, and it's something like that. But other than the timestamp, there's really not much, and the timestamp's just not enough.
Okay, so I agree, and here's where I think this could be a meta commentary. In the last episode that we just reviewed, we find the goats, and there's that line that we talked about. Hopefully this is in the podcast that was aired. There's as they walk away after seeing the goats, Ellie says, "What if the goats are the numbers?"
Right.
And we talked about how this is like a shot at viewers, and
Okay.
not necessarily
So,
us, because
keep talking about that, because that was in the one that didn't make the air. We didn't talk about that in the one that made the air.
Okay. So Helly and Mark, they see the goats. They're like, "Rah, rah." They're not ready, blah, blah, blah. And then as they're walking away, they're theorizing about what it could be. And Helly says this thing that is obviously, I think, is kind of dumb. She says, what if the goats are the numbers? And I took it as a shot at people that analyze shows like this, like us, but a little dumber, and make like wild theories. Like, and what if the goats are the numbers is a wild theory like that? And there's actually a word for it where you attribute patterns where they don't exist. And this word became like popular in the lexicon when the show Lost was out, because like everything that happened on Lost, people would be like, what if that's the smoke monster? Or what if the island is this? Like that. And I think Severance is either borrowing from Lost or making fun of Lost in a lot of the ways that it like poses these crazy questions and these crazy ideas. So that's why in the Lexington Letter, when she's like, okay, this thing happened at 2:30 and this truck accident happened at 2:30, they must be related. I think the show is playing with that idea of connecting things that aren't necessarily connecting.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. And finding connections and by extension, conspiracies everywhere. So yeah. The thing with Helly saying that about the goats is totally a dig at that. And I think that, I think that Peg is just having like a wound up emotional reaction. Although there's clearly something going on because, they get rid of her innie right away and the whole thing. But I'm sorry, someone's beeping me. But I still don't think that necessarily it has something to do with the accident. Because here's the other thing. How and why? All right, let's suppose for a moment that Peg is correct and whatever they do with the numbers caused this to happen in some way. How? What is it that happens? Like, what would have happened if she hadn't sorted that and she hadn't gotten to 100%? Because remember, as we learned in a previous episode, like a large percentage of the files are not completed, right? So if this had just been another incompleted thing, would the truck not have blown up? Is that what the implication is? Is that what the extrapolation is?
No, we agree. I think Peg is making a connection that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So we agree there. But let's lay out the other theory. Like, okay, so
I mean, the other theory is that it does, but I don't see.
Yeah, but how?
But how and why? And it's fucking Lumon. They can't like hire some industrial espionage thing. Better that the numbers sort into something that screws up a production machine at the other pharmaceutical company and ruins their prototype than something that blows up and kills people, right? That just seems like just way too much. And even though I don't know what it freaking is, it seems like a waste of MDR to use it on something so, banal and trivial, ultimately trivial as industrial sabotage and espionage, Why do you need people separate? I mean, is it all for plausible deniability? Layer after layer after layer after layer. Okay, you look like you've got something. So what?
So this is what I keep coming back to with Lumon. Like, Lumon has been a successful company for a long time. So successful that, they were a, renowned deodorant brand back in the 80s. I don't know if that means success but necessarily. But, Lumon has accomplished something revolutionary with the chip.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to be spending a lot of effort just on silly bullshit. Right? And so that's why I think there's a management problem. I don't think we're going to find out there's a mastermind at the head doing something totally crazy and totally unique. I think we're going to find out that it's just a bunch of people thinking they're working for this person, but really they're working for that person, and they're not really getting anything done. I think we're going to find out that it's all pretty silly. And the last thing you said just kind of reinforced that point for me.
Huh. Well, I mean, I think that there is something that they are up to. I just don't think it's necessarily, blowing. I mean, they could be responsible for the incident as well, but I don't know how MDR and the numbers we see and the floppity flops and this tie into that. Now that could be, the mysterious and important thing, but it also seems like okay, so let's game it out for real. Okay, let's assume that's the case, that is what happens. The Rolodex that you see on the screen when you log in and you're looking for your file, those are all names of what? Cities, streets, people, people to be taken out, whatever. So you get your thing, and there's no guarantee you're going to complete the file. And it seems that completing the file is the thing that is required to have the event happen, to have the truck blow up in this case. It was the completion of the file at a particular time that caused, in this scenario, that caused the truck to blow up 2 minutes later. Okay, fine. But what happens if she didn't finish the file? That truck wouldn't have blown up, and those prototypes would have gone on, and that plan would have been foiled. So it just seems like a ridiculous thing with the failure to close the file rate that they say officially in the show, which was what, like 70% or something? What does Dylan say? It's a high number, right?
They close much less than half of them.
Much less
most
than half
of them go.
Okay, so
you're going close.
You're putting your feet like there was less than 50% chance that Peggy was going to finish the Lexington file, right? So what happens if she didn't? That's the point that doesn't really make sense to me. One of the many in this theory. So anyway, I just wanted to illustrate that one.
Yeah. Now, Peg does get taken out. She's worried. She sees black cars next to her. Mm-hmm. She sees all these things that make her scared. She goes to a motel and then does die in a car accident. So that is real. That Peg tried to kind of fight the system. Because Audi Peg quit. Yeah. Yeah. Audi Peg did quit. Your innie can't quit, but your Audi can, right?
Well, now wait a second. It's almost like they fired the Audi. Fired the innie, right? Because Peg says, I went down and then I came right back up, and only 10 minutes has passed and I'm already coming back up, right? So that means in 10 minutes they had sent the Audi back up. For whatever reason, like, you're out of here. So that seemed kind of weird. Or the Audi had fled. So whatever. You got anything else? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump.
Yeah, no. So, Lumon, I mean, I think it's safe to say Lumon kills people.
I
right?
think that's safe to say, yeah.
Yeah. And they killed Peg. I think that's pretty much...
they may have killed Petey. I mean, you could argue they killed Petey, but they may have actually whacked Petey right there or in the hospital.
Yeah. The other thing, the end of the whole Lincoln Letter thing being that, like, the editor at the newspaper is like, hey, Daria, a little out there. Can you just get back to covering the high school basketball playoffs?
Right.
Like that. That is the Lincoln Letter. I don't think is a perfect piece of writing, but that line at the end was like that. As news media missing what's important, and someone being assigned to have to focus on something like high school basketball. I'm a big fan, but still. I thought that was a really, like, kind of good, sad note for it to end on.
Well, it didn't quite end on that note.
Okay, what else? What am I forgetting?
let me just point something out first before we get to the end. And that is, there is a point where, I'm sorry, I slipped off mic. There's a point where Peggy slips Peg a note that says, Lumon updating code detectors, but they're down today. So how does she know?
Yeah.
Does Lumon announce, oh, today the code detectors are down? Doesn't seem like something they would announce if their whole purpose is to keep, like, because obviously even the newest innie is going to have enough brain power to be like, oh, now's my chance to take a code out, right? That didn't make sense to me. But anyway,
Yeah.
keep that
I
in
mean, you could reread this entire Lumon letter as that the notes were actually Lumon sending them, not any Peggy sending them discreetly.
right.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it could. I mean, that could be just as much. And then, yes. So her editor spikes her interest in the article. She pushes back, and then he comes back and tells her, "Oh, too late. Peg is dead." And that email at the very end, the very last freaking thing in the entire Lexington letter, is her editor's name, not just her initials. His initials. His name is
shit.
Jim. Oh, you missed that?
Way. Yes, I totally missed it.
Jim Milchick.
What the fuck?
Dude, you got to read till the end. Yes. Milchick. Clearly in the employ even then of Lumon, clearly working for Lumon, whether or not as a Lumon employee planted there to kill the story, or just someone who's on the payroll and then goes on to greater things, hired by Lumon. But I bet that is our good friend, Mr. Milchick of the Bad Soap and Break Room.
Hey, to Jim, Speaking Star, Daria, set November 12th. They are intentionally leaving out the year here.
Yeah.
They give you all the information. They give you they give you a sent line, but they just say November 12th at 12:43, which any email would have the year. They're
Yep.
intentionally leaving out the year.
Yep.
So, so where do you think this is happening? If you just had to guess, where do you think this is happening in relation, time-wise, temporally, to the events of Severance the Show, season 1?
I think it's several years before. It could be as many as 5 years before, or maybe 6, because, Milchick is doing his job, I guess, as the editor, but he's working for Lumon. So in my mind, my little fanfic has Milchick proving himself and then going and jumping to work for Lumon and then winding up, working on the severed floor in the main headquarters in the town of Kier. Anyway,
the name Kincaid does that mean anything in Severance?
not offhand. Nope.
Nope, nothing. Okay. It's just the letter. Okay, so it's not like no relation to Cobell or anything like that.
Not as far as I can
tell. Okay. I already said my piece about how Lumon has accomplished something incredible with the chip. Why are they dealing with all this silly BS? I already said that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that was my last note.
Yeah, so I think we're done with the Lumon Lexington letter, the Lumon letter.
Done with the Lexington letter. So the next thing we're gonna do is the handbook, which I have not read yet. So that's gonna be our next mini pod. Well,
Yep.
What we said was gonna be a mini podcast. This did not turn out to be very mini.
Because there's a lot to freaking talk about. This,
Yeah.
The thing has more pages, but there's fewer stuff on the page. But there's some stuff to talk about. Now, keep in mind, and this is something we really need to discuss. In the Lexington letter, one line we didn't get to is she passes Peggy the handbook, right? That's why we have the handbook. I'm sorry, Peggy passes Peg the handbook, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we have it, because she's included it in the letter to Daria, the Lexington letter. in the Lexington Letter, Peggy says, I've included the handbook. The answers are in there if you look for them. So we needed to look for them. I didn't necessarily find them on my 67th pass, but I'll try again. Give it a shot, Jambo. We'll reconvene and see what we can make, what sense we can make out of that. And then after we do that, we'll get back to episode 106, and we'll wrap up our big, deep, full spoiler look back on season 1 of Severance. And then we'll just be sitting twiddling our thumbs until season 2 comes out. If you liked this, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you are notified when we bust out our next thing, I guess is how it works. And also leave a comment. That's also a way to help the algorithm. Let us know what you think. Let us know your thoughts on all of these theories. If we missed something, tell us about it. If you agree, or especially if you disagree and you have a contradictory theory or a different theory, we would love to see it in the comment section. And if it's good, we'll read it on air next time, and we'll start a viewer comments, a viewer email or comments thing. So definitely use the comment section. We will be doing a live stream in the next week or so just to test that out, and then having a big one to wrap up season 1 of Severance on our look back here. So stay tuned for all of that, as well as all the other shows and political stuff and crap we're going to do here. So that is that. Until next time, we will see you guys for the handbook.
Good night.